My bad. Okay, so I am recording now, and I'm just going to briefly review that. So today we're going to work in Photoshop. I want to show a couple of extra things in Rhino that I didn't show last time. So while I'm doing that, please download these images so that you can follow along in class today for Photoshop. And then if you haven't gotten on the S drive yet, please do so as well. So because next week we will need to access the S drive in order to start assignment 2. I also have a link to Rhino TV here, which has a lot more tutorials on Rhino 5. If you felt like you still need some more work in that, I would encourage you to go ahead and in your spare time watch some tutorials to better acquaint yourself with the software so that when it comes down to the final assignment you're not really struggling. I did get section 1 graded last night, but I haven't posted it yet, so I'm going to do that after we get section 2 graded as well. But there are a few people that could utilize Rhino TV and some Rhino tips and some Rhino handouts. So with that, I'm going to jump over to Rhino and hopefully just spend about 10 minutes in here showing some cool stuff. Before I forget, also, this website, cgtextures.com, it's also written up here on the board. Go ahead and create a membership for that. It's free. Just utilize your Vandal email address, and then you have access to a lot of different types of textures, fabrics, background images. They're really great, so I would definitely take advantage of that. And then this is the Rhino 3D TV site. And if you're interested, and I would recommend just spending maybe once a week taking a look at this in the next few weeks and learn a little bit more about Rhino. Okay, so basically what I want to do is get this set up for a render. And so two things that I forgot to kind of mention, and one of them was actually part of the matrix for the grading, so I kind of gave everybody free points for a few things, was the Boolean split tool. And what that does is if you have two intersecting objects, so for instance, our chair, like our seat itself, and our leg here, they intersect each other. And just to make that clean, we can utilize the Boolean split tool. And what that basically says is select cutting surface or poly surface. And so we'd want to select what we want to cut and then press enter. Oops. Let's try that one more time. I'm going to right click to restart that. So I'm going to select what I want to cut, press enter, and then select the poly surface that I want to cut it with, and enter. Whoops, let's Control Z that. Picking the wrong side. So let's try that again. Why is it doing this to me? No, it worked. Okay, it's just acting funny. So basically what that has done is it split the two surfaces. So it split the one surface or solid into two separate solids, and it's cut it at that specific angle that the chair is resting on it. So it's no longer protruding up into the object. And so you can go ahead and delete that piece that is already protruding. And so it just makes the model a bit cleaner. And so you can go ahead and do that with, anything. I did it with this shape earlier today. And so that way, you're not having objects kind of inside other objects. You can also do it with the seat bracket as well. And then of course you can group stuff or actually join like all of this stuff together so that it's one object with the join command. So those are kind of things that I never really touched on that were apparently part of the matrix. So everybody kind of got a free 15 points on that. But I wanted to go over it so that you guys had that knowledge. The other thing that I want to do is just quickly apply some materials and a ground plane, and then also talk about environments, which are basically, you can get like a panoramic image off the internet of a sky and use that as an environment for rendering, so that when you render anything that has a reflective surface will reflect that sky material. And so it adds another layer of detail, and it makes the image a little more realistic because there's reflections of the sky on buildings, right? And so it just it's an easy way to make your renders a little more realistic. So I'm gonna quickly, hopefully everybody is downloading those images as I talk. I'm just gonna quickly add a silver metal to all this stuff. Do by object and select the metal, and I don't know if I have that selected. I'm gonna select these guys as well and add that silver color to it, and then just for the heck of it, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a new material of some type of wood on, like a polished cherry. And I'm also going to apply a ground plane, and I'm going to just go ahead and add some grass. And I'm up in the air a bit, so I'm going to create a solid box. And just so I'm sitting on something. And I'm going to also apply a material to that. And I'm just going to go ahead and do some marble, so that it's sitting on the ground plane. You notice this area back here is gray. If we go to our render settings and we turn on our environment here, we can create a new environment, and it has some images already in here, but it's not really what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go over to where I've already downloaded and saved, a sky. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And this is it's a panorama sky, and it's an HDR or HDRI texture, I think. So at any rate, where are you? Of course, this is not working. Why? Why are you working now? This is kind of annoying. I love it when crap works. It doesn't work. That's so nice. No. Just trying stuff because it was working this morning. That's retarded. Let me quickly open up my other file and see if I have some weird setting on that I don't have. So bear with me for just a second here because this should work. I'm in assignment 1. And what do I have going on here that I don't have going on in the other file? Okay, so what you want to do is use the duplicate tool of the original environment and duplicate it and then edit that and then apply whatever sky thumbnail that you want. Now it's working. Great. Okay, so you can see that the reflectivity of this silver is picking up that sky. And so it's just adding that much more detail to the image. And so also the reflectivity of this marble has hints of the sky in it as well. And so it just adds that little more detail to that. So that's really what I wanted to show today, was the environment mapping, which is dropping in a background sky basically, that your materials then reflect, so it adds a little more reflectivity, and then that Boolean split tool. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and close this because we've already rendered out I already have rendered it out, and hopefully you guys have downloaded that already off of Blackboard. So, Photoshop. Mine's going to look a little different. I have CS 5.1 versus the cloud CS 6, but there's not a ton of difference between them as far as I know. The color might be darker. I don't know. But besides for that, there's probably a few extra tools that CS6 has that I don't have, but chances are you'll never notice. You'll never use them. So just to kind of go over briefly how to start a new project. Hopefully most of you have used Photoshop, but go up to File, New, and it brings up a dialog box where you can, I have some preset in here for board sizes, but probably US paper is standard that kind of comes up. But you can go ahead and go down to custom, and you can type in any width or any height you want, or you could do it by millimeters or points or pixels. And then you can choose your resolution. So typically you're going to want to probably work with about a 300 pixels per inch resolution. I think standard clipboard's like 72, which is fairly low. So you'll want to end up changing that. And then the color mode, you can basically choose what kind of color mode you want. Either you're working with RGB, which is red, green, and blue, or CMYK, which is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And I haven't really used CMYK much. I just kind of have stuck with the RGB. But you can then also choose your bit size. And of course, the larger you make this, the larger the file size is going to get. So I've always kind of worked with 8-bit color, but as you move up, you have your file size get bigger, and you have a lot more choice of colors as well. I'm going to stick with the 8-bit. The other thing is you can set your backgrounds to be transparent or a specific color or just white. And then once you start to define different sizes using the custom, you can rename them and save them as a preset, so that when you go to click this down arrow, you have different size images to start with. So I know, like in second year, I think I probably set all these up because I didn't know how to use Illustrator or InDesign to create a board, so I was using Photoshop to create my boards. So I was just kind of random paper sizes for board layouts. We're not really going to start into a new one. Rarely you will, because you'll just be opening up one of your renders and starting to manipulate it. But it's good to know how to create a new file. Also, pixel aspect ratio. So this kind of defines your length and height in respect to each other. If you start to use some of these other ones, it changes your width and height to be in proportion to each other based upon these settings. I just typically keep it on square pixels. Click OK, and there's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that's 300 DPI that you can start to draw on if you were going to start drawing stuff. But typically for architecture and interior design, we already have an image to start out with, and we're just kind of manipulating that to add context, shadows, and overlays and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and go File, Open, and I'm going to navigate to the image that hopefully everybody has downloaded these by now. Go ahead and open that up. You can see my sky is terrible, but because it's such a small image, but the render itself is not bad. So if we go up to our image and down to image size, you'll see that the resolution is 300 pixels per inch, and it's a fairly small image. It's 6.4 inches by 3.6. If we wanted to make this a larger image without by changing the resolution, right? If I decrease the resolution, I'm taking off the resample image check button here, and if I type in 150, I'll have my pixels per inch will be 150 versus 300, and so you're kind of losing a little bit of resolution, but you're getting a larger image, right? 12.8 by 7.2. If I left that at 300 and clicked my resample image size, and I actually typed in like 1200 pixels, I'm basically taking those 300 and dividing them up into even smaller pixels. And so if I click OK, it's going to make the image appear bigger, but it's not bigger at the moment. But if we go back to our image size again and take off our resample and reduce it back to 300 inches, now we have a 25.6 by 14.4. And so it's a lot larger of an image, and it's still 300 pixels. You will lose a little bit of resolution because of the way that you're kind of resampling and then downgrading the image, but it won't be enough that you'll notice once it gets printed on a piece of paper. And when we zoom in here, you know, you can start to see a little bit of granularity, but it's still, you know, pretty nice. And then the other thing is once you take this image into another software to put it on a board, you may end up shrinking that down anyways. And so once you start to shrink that down, the resolution will increase. And so today what I want to kind of run over is like different types of blending modes, and then some layer adjustments versus image adjustments. And then if we have time at the end of class, we'll kind of start to look at custom textures and how to create some textures. And then we'll review that next week, and we'll do some lab time to run over that. But pretty much the end game for today is to get something kind of like this. And it's not necessarily important that, like, this is kind of more like artsy-fartsy and not necessarily something that you would probably want to put on a board, but it gets you to kind of understand what blending modes are and how they work. And notice there's not like a ton of work here. I think this took me about 15 minutes to do, so hopefully we'll walk through it fairly quickly, but we'll see. We might slow down a little bit, but it's at any rate, I'd like you to try to follow along. And so all those images that you downloaded, I basically have used in this image here. So, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm a little behind. Where do we go to get this image? Or do we-
Blackboard. Blackboard handouts, and then Photoshop images. There's just a series of JPEGs and a PNG. So the new chair is more or less this image that I'm looking at right here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, okay. I gotta remember what the heck I actually did over here. Okay, so we kind of started out with a background image or a layer. If you ever open up an image and it says background layer and it's locked here, you can right click it, and at the top there should be, say, create layer from background. Since mine's already an image and yours might be as well, it may not have that, but that's good to know. I think also if you hold the shift and double click, well, since it's not one, it's going to pop up the layering styles. But at any rate, that should unlock the background and make it a layer so that you can actually manipulate it. Oh, also, I don't know if I mentioned, kind of like spazzing here with too much coffee, but on BB Learn, there's also this handout that has a lot of the quick keys, shortcuts for stuff, and some kind of definitions of useful tools and concepts. So layer masks versus clipping masks, adjustment layers, the FX icon, background layers, pixels, select content by color. I don't know, some of the stuff I don't even use, but it's useful to know. And the transform tool is definitely something you'll want to learn at some point. We'll teach you that. Probably today, actually. So just to kind of go over the toolbar here, edit has the transform tool in it, which allows you to scale a layer, rotate a layer, skew a layer, distort a layer, add perspective, or even a wrap, which puts like a mesh over it and you can start to manipulate the layer. Probably don't want to do it to this background image at the moment, but it's very useful, and you'll use the transform tool a lot to get what you want out of your layers. And then the fill tool, Shift F5 is the quick key for that, and Control T is the quick key for transform. So if you have reduced opacity on your image and you want to see what it looks like with a white background, you can add a new layer and fill it with white so that you can see what it looks like when it's like on a page. The image itself tool basically affects whatever the entire image, not just a single layer. So under the image tool, you have mode, which allows you to change your color mode for the entire file. It also allows you to make adjustments, which if you don't have a quick access toolbar here under our windows, you can check adjustments and they should come up. I have adjustments, history, and layers on right now as the three kind of primary that are useful. And other adjustments that don't really show up here that are kind of useful is HDR toning. This tool is actually really cool, but you have to be careful with using it. It's one of those tools that I would recommend using at the very beginning before you add a bunch of layers, because it's basically going to want to flatten your entire image, which takes all of the layers that you've created and compress them down to one layer. And then you can't edit them, right? So if you are going to utilize the HDR toning, basically it allows you to make some bumps in like your detail. Is a good one to start bumping up, and it starts to add where there's like maybe black lines or something. It just starts to add some more detail to it. The vibrance, and you can start to play around with this stuff, but you can see that it makes the image you can do a lot of things with this, and you can get really carried away with it. If you press enter at all, it basically is like clicking OK, and the only way to get it back is to Control Z and undo it. But also you can change your curves too, and it's one of those things that is a really cool tool, but it can also really screw you up too, so you want to be careful using it. But it's good to be aware of it, and when you have some time, I would take an image that you've rendered out and maybe play with it and see what it does to some of your materials. I especially like to bump the details and then kind of play with the vibrance and saturation a little bit, and then the edge glows, the radius and strength. I try to stay away from the exposure and also this toning curve, because it's kind of difficult to manipulate. And then the shadows and highlights you can start to bump a little bit too, but as you can see, like the gammas, you really kind of don't want to mess with those. And then the exposure starts to darken the image or brightens the image. Detail kind of starts to pop some of these areas in here where there's black, and so it just kind of adds a little more depth to the image. And then shadows, I don't know, they don't, if you can look at the shadow down here, if I turn it up, it starts to like put like a white glow around it. So it's not something that I really like to manipulate much. And then highlights, you can see what that does as well. And then vibrance kind of takes color out or puts it in, depending on how much you want to control that. And you just kind of manipulate this thing until your eye kind of says, oh yeah, that looks pretty good. You know, there's not an exact science to it. And everybody's eye is a little bit different. So there's also some presets in here. They don't really necessarily work all that well, but you can actually, once you have an exposure level that you like, you know, of all your, you can save those as a preset. So once you, and every image is going to be a little different, and so you may not want to do that. But if you have multiple renders from the same file that all look very similar, and you get one, you just one that looks really good, you can save that as a preset, and 9 times out of 10 that preset will look pretty good in your other images as well. And then this kind of just allows you to only adjust certain things. And the local adaptation is the one that allows you to kind of manually manipulate it. And if you have the preview unchecked, you won't see the changes occur. So it's nice to have that preview checked. Now this looks absolutely terrible, so I'm not gonna click OK. I'm just gonna click cancel because I don't really want to make these changes. But it's a good tool to utilize right off the bat on your image to just kind of bump some of those details and maybe shift the saturation and vibrance and the strength a little bit. And now obviously my image is a background image and it's locked, and so if I hit shift and double click, it's a quick access to creating a layer from that background image. So if I click OK, it makes it a background image. I'm going to click Control Z to undo, and I can also right click and say layer from background, and it takes me to the same place. If you notice down, if you have your history turned on, you'll see that you can start to go backwards on your history. So if you don't like doing something, did something you don't like, you can go backwards. You can also Control Z undoes one thing, and then Control Alt Z continues to go backward in the commands that you've kind of established. On a Mac, it might be a little bit different. It might be the Apple key and Z, and then the I'm trying to picture the Mac keyboard, and I can't do it right now. But that command will be a little bit different. You can also go to the Edit tab and step forward or step backwards. From experience, let me tell you, you can only step backwards so many times. So be careful with that. Yeah, just be careful. Warning. So the Layer tab allows you to create new layers or duplicate a layer that's highlighted or selected. New fill layer. You can kind of walk through what this stuff does, because I'd really like to get through kind of just adding more layers here. Filters we'll touch briefly on a little bit, hopefully at the end of today, especially this offset. But all of these are filters that you can put on a layer that's selected that changes and makes it look different. And a lot of these you can tell that it's a photoshopped filter layer because of the way that it kind of repeats the the patterns. So they're not like the best to use, but you should play around with them. They're definitely interesting. View, you can zoom in and out, fit on screen. You can go to actual pixel size. So if I clicked on that, that technically is actual pixel size, but what I don't like is that this measuring tool, if you don't have that up, by the way, you can turn on rulers with the Control R, or under View, that basically puts a ruler on there so you can see how big your image is. But that's not really 1 inch, right? So to me, that's not quite. Control minus zooms out, control plus zooms in. So, that's more or less real size, and you start to look at, looks a little bit bigger on that screen, but, your thumb length from knuckle to tip of your thumb is about 1 inch, roughly, typically. And then windows basically allow you to bring up more of your toolbars here. And so you can have your brushes turned on, channels, all sorts of stuff. But the ones that you'll really probably use the most is layers and adjustments. Everything else you can get through your quick access toolbar, which is here. So basically, to go through this kind of quickly here, the arrow key basically is your select tool. If you have this auto select on, it allows you to click on whatever you click on, it basically selects that layer. So if you have multiple layers in here and you're having trouble figuring out what layer you want to grab, you can always hover over the element and select it, and it highlights that layer. The marquee tool allows you to select certain objects on whatever layer you have highlighted. And this particular one just allows you to do rectangles, circles, and single row marquees. But this one right below it, if you hold down while you're hovering over that, hold down the left mouse button, you'll end up with some extra options here. The lasso tool allows you to kind of free form a selection. You Control Z that. The polygon lasso allows you, if you hold the shift key down, allows you to make a more rectangular selection. And then to close it back up, you'll get a little circle there, and that then closes that. And so what you can do is you can like Control C, Control V that, copy that particular piece, or maybe add a color to that particular area, or add a new layer and put a different color in there. And then the last one is the magic lasso, which is where if you click it, it'll start to selectively follow a particular line. But it's kind of tricky to use, and you can change the width and the constraints of it to get it to define a little bit better what you want to do. The space bar allows you to pan around the screen a bit. I'm going to escape out of that tool because I don't particularly like it. The magic wand, there's two different magic wands. One's a quick select tool that allows you to kind of just quickly grab a particular area. I'm going to Control minus to just take us out a little bit. To quickly, grab a particular area. I'm going to Control D to deselect all that. And the magic wand tool itself starts to select a certain color, and the tolerance here, as you change that, will affect how much it selects. And so if we were to select all this stuff, Control plus just a little bit, you notice that what I really want to do is kind of select the background of the image. I don't necessarily want to select what's on the chair. And the reason why it started to select this portion of the chair was because it's a similar color as this, and the tolerance is set, at 32, so it's wanting to select that. And up here in your little quick access area, you can change whether you want to do a single selection, multiple selections, or even subtract a selection. And so I'm going to go to my polygon lasso tool, and I'm going to actually use the deselect portion, and I'm just going to start down here kind of and work my way up and around the chair so that and I'm just kind of trying to hit the areas that I don't want to be added in to my selection here. That was pretty good. Sometimes it takes you some time to get used to creating this or using that tool. But basically I deselected, I didn't quite get all of it, so that I'm just kind of have these areas selected in here, and the chair is actually not selected at all. And so with my layer, if it's on a background, I can't actually delete the background out. I have to create a layer from that. But I can just go ahead and press the delete button after I have that kind of selected, and it deletes out that background. So, and then I'm going to click Control D to deselect. And so I still have my my reflectivity from the render, that shows a background on the material, but I don't have the background anymore. And so if I go to File, Open, and navigate to that thumbnail sky that I used, and click Open, you can see it's a smaller image. It's a 17-inch image, and the image size is 72 dpi. I'm going to resample that to being 1200, and then I'm going to go back and make it a 300 dpi image. Click OK. And I can drag this off here and actually literally drag this layer into this file. I can go ahead and close that. And I can readjust these layers, so I can select this layer and drag it below the other layer. I'm going to Control minus a little bit, and then I'm going to press Control T in order to use the transform tool. And that allows me to, if I hold the shift key down, it allows me to just kind of shrink this image down a little bit more. And I'm kind of liking it sitting just off to the side, so there's kind of that perspective point starts to become that background area there. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to think for a second. But I still have this empty side over here, and so if I right click this layer 1 and duplicate it, click OK, I can now move it over. Maybe this needs to come over just a little bit further. And I want to overlap these. Not liking it. Maybe we'll select both of those and hit Control T and just make them a bit bigger and press Enter. Use my arrow key to nudge a little bit. And my copy, I'm going to overlap them just a bit, but you can still see that there's a pretty decent line here. And so what we want to do is actually create add a layer mask to this particular layer. And what that allows us to do is blend those two layers together. And down here at the bottom of this tool we have some color palettes. If yours is not black and white, if you click this little button here, this button, it makes one of them black and one of them white. And the flip between the two is we just hit X as a quick key. And so when you're doing a layer mask like this, we can paint black on here, and what it's actually doing is it's transparent. It makes the image transparent. If we use the white, it puts it back in. And so it actually really, you want your mode to be on normal, and on your layer, you want that to be normal as well. And our brush size, we can change. So this is the brush tool right here, if nobody was kind of paying attention. And so you have some options here, but we're going to utilize the brush tool. And we can change our size of our brush manually here, and what type of brush. We have a lot of different types of brushes to choose from, but we're going to stick with one of these ones that kind of has a featherness to it. This is a really hard surface, right? So and this one's not very hard. So we're going to utilize one of those. And then you'll notice that my brush size is fairly small. If you hit the bracket key, there's two bracket keys, that increases the size of my brush and decreases the size of my brush, depending on what size I want. And then the opacity of the brush, if I have it on full opacity, it's going to basically take that away completely. I'm painting with the black, makes it transparent, putting it back on. But it's still not quite blending exactly the way we would want it to blend, and so we can reduce the opacity of our brush to something fairly low. And if I Control plus and work my way in here, I can start to just kind of click a couple of times. Oh, I'm on the white mode. Sorry, I want to switch back to black. I was wondering why that wasn't happening. We can start to blend those two together, and it basically eliminates that line fairly smoothly. So black is transparent, white brings whatever the material is back, and our opacity and our brush hardness is down to 0 basically, and our mode is normal. Okay. So now we have kind of a pretty nice looking sky in the background. That's starting to make the image look a little nicer here. So, just to kind of briefly talk about adjustments, we probably aren't going to get through all this today, which is a shame. But we have a brightness contrast adjustment, a levels adjustment, curves adjustment. These adjustments can be applied to all of this stuff. So I move it to the top. I can start to adjust the brightness and contrast of the entire image. But let's just say I want it to only affect one layer. Also, since I have these two layers kind of working together, I can go ahead and select them and merge them together, merge the layers so that they're only one layer. I can select my brightness contrast and create a clipping mask. And what that does is it says I'm only going to apply this adjustment to the layer below it. And so now you can see we can adjust the brightness and contrast of just the background. So, you know, if we want to make this a little darker, maybe it's, you know, sunset, you can start to manipulate that to make it look like a sunset. And so there are a lot of different adjustment layers. Levels, for instance, I'm going to move this above all of the layers so that it affects all of them. But you can see that it kind of does a similar thing, but in a different way. And so kind of gets into blending modes a bit. So whatever's dark starts to become transparent. Whatever's light starts to become dark. So you can kind of get pretty complicated with these, but let's just stick with normal for now. That's starting to look kind of cool. This area is starting to pop out a little bit more than the rest of the image. It's kind of dropping into the background. The other thing that we can do is we can start to soften the edges, and that's kind of called vignetting. And I would encourage you to explore some more of these adjustment layers on your own. We're not going to get through all of them today, but they do a lot of interesting things. We can create, here under our layers, we have some tools where we can create a new layer. And this layer, we will actually want to change its blending mode to be a multiplier. And hopefully I'll get to kind of showing a little bit more, but to adding kind of some ambient shadows and things like that, we can also apply those modes to our brushes as well. And so I'm going to utilize a multiplier mode. I'm going to stick with black, and we can start to add shadow to areas and reducing our brush size, and we can come in and add some more detail in here. Kind of running through this quickly, but can start to add shadows in areas that might probably have some shadows, so that it starts to look a little more realistic. And then the other, and so the other one we can also do is, and again, use multiplier. We can increase our brush size. If you ever find that this isn't working, just kind of click off into the view area, but not on the image itself, and it should start to work again. But we can start to soften the edges of this image if we want to, you know, create more of a focal point. This is what's called vignetting. You see, like on real photographs and older photographs, you'll get this kind of black shadow in some of older photographs. So it just starts to, like, you know, add a focal area to the image. Another kind of cool one that I started to just play around with is this polarized or posturized adjustment layer. And if we start to use that, it kind of just softens, I think, at least I think it does, kind of these layers that we created, and it kind of just allows it to blend a little bit more together. Or if you really want to have some crazy image, or not at all. And so the strength of it, you can start to do some kind of cool stuff with that. Let's talk a little bit more about blending modes, and it's a little bit easier to understand if we go ahead and open up one of these broken glass textures. We'll utilize this one. Click open. And I'm going to drag it into here. Well, I'm going to Control Z that, and I'm going to change the size of it first. I'm going to resample. Resample to 1200. And maybe it didn't want to do that. I'm going to go back to my image size and change that back to 300 so that I have a fairly large image that I'm dropping into here. Yeah, it's a really large image. I'm going to use my Control T. Such a large image that it's bogging down a bit. I don't know, that's pretty good. So once you have your Control T and you're transforming this, if you click anywhere within the image itself, right click, it's kind of a quick access toolbar to changing how you want to transform the layer itself. So we're not going to use these today, but I just want to let you know that they're there, so you don't have to go up to edit, down to transform, and select some of these tools. You can just right click, and the skew tool and the distort tool I use frequently. Allows you to distort an image and maybe put it on a surface, which is kind of cool. But at any rate, let that think for a second. Probably made that image a little too big. And yes, I did. I'm going to pause. Technically, it's going to be a little pixelated, but when you start to change the blending mode of this layer, if you select darken, right, it takes everything that's light and makes it transparent and leaves the darkened areas dark. You use the multiplier tool. You can see these start to do a little bit different things. If I use the shift key and the down arrow, I can start to cycle through these. And so now I'm in the lightened modes. And so you can do kind of all sorts of cool effects with blending modes. So basically what it's doing is it's blending that image with the image in the background. So you can only go down so far and then it stops. But I think I utilized like a I think a screen is what I did. Yeah. And of course you can kind of move this off to the side or something. But you can have different effects. And so basically that kind of, if you start to understand what's happening, you can start to use these these modes when you're actually painting onto surfaces. And so you can get effects where a little bit of movement in an object based upon utilizing a screen or a screen layer or a lighten layer. And so like the darken categories, basically black is opaque and the white is transparent. And then the lighten categories, white is opaque and black is transparent. And then overlay starts to mix. This image doesn't do itself as justice to show this, but it starts to mix the two types together. Okay. We're not going to get to textures. We'll do that at the beginning of next class. Does anybody have any questions in the last 5 minutes?
What is rasterize? Like when we do our separate second studio and you try to do like different shapes and sometimes those are pop up as you use like rasterize the image. What does that mean? Yeah. Is that a hard question?
It's not fair to answer that.
Wishing Ryan was here.
Ryan would know that answer.
Oh. It's okay if you don't know. I was just curious because that pops up for me a lot, so I don't know what that means.
When does it pop up?
Yeah.
Google's awesome.
So basically it takes a image that is vector based or line like Illustrator and converts it to pixels like a normal image.
Yeah. I should have known that. Any other questions that I'm not going to be able to answer, but ask them anyways? No? Oh yeah, you can also reduce the opacities on these to get it to blend a little bit better together. So